My name is Stephen Thomas. I'm CEO of Rennaisance Services, which is a public company listed on the Muscat securities market. We're an Omani multinational company operating in 17 different countries. We're engaged primarily in oil and gas services. Our main businesses are marine. We own an offshore support vessel fleet, engineering, where we repair things and make things for the oil and gas industry, and we repair and make things for the marine industry. And we're in contract services, where we do facilities management, look after people. Well, I think to look at the effect of corporate governance in the region and CSR issues in the region, you first need to look at how it affects companies, then the individual regulatory markets, and then the region as a whole. So if you start with at the corporate level, at the end of the day, corporate governance is about how well a business is managed, its systems and processes and protocols. It's about looking after shareholder interests. At the end of the day, it's a very good way of doing business. And if you are in a market, as we are, listed on the Muscat securities market, where you have a good regulator with a strong framework of all the principles that you would expect to see for accountability and good corporate ethics in any bourse anywhere in the world, you see here in the Muscat securities market, it gives people confidence, and at the end of the day, capital is attracted to those markets that have good companies with good governance, good regulation. And so the more this happens in the context of the region, and the region gets recognized as a bastion of good corporate governance, it is going to attract more and more foreign investment. I mean, it's now, in this age, investment is an international phenomenon. And of course, the major markets, London and New York and others, attract so much capital. But investors are always looking for new and better opportunities to invest. And so good governance in the region will only help to attract more capital to the region. And there's a lot of capital already here. And it's also about wanting to keep that capital here as well, the better the governance is. And you're asking about corporate social responsibility as well, and it's interesting that increasingly corporate governance and CSR are being more inextricably interwoven as one subject. You have now in India, they've started this ESG index, of environment, social responsibility and governance. Now, how come I'm looking at having a similar index here in this region? And so, just as governance is about our stewardship of our shareholders' interests, and I think most importantly the small shareholders' interests, if you get that right, then you're looking after all your shareholders. But similarly, environment is about our stewardship of our impact on the planet, our impact on the local environments in which we operate, and increasingly investors are more and more concerned about the ethical way in which businesses do have impact on the environment. And of course, social responsibility is about stewardship of our people, development of our local workforces, development of skills, development of the local communities in which we serve. So when you bring those three elements together under an ethical framework of good governance, that is something that will be more and more attractive to investors. And it's early days yet. I know that the ESG index in India has not built up enough critical mass of empirical evidence, but there is a strong suggestion that companies that manage their environment, social responsibility, and governance well actually perform better in their peer groups. And that, to me, that doesn't surprise me. You know, people see initially, things like governance and corporate social responsibility is a cost. So good governance is about a cost of being a public company. Well, that's not right. I mean, good governance should be applied in any company. Taking the principles that provide good governance in a public company and applying them to a private company or a family business will see that business perform much better. You know, in the early days of, when HSE was, health, safety and environment, we obviously our services are principally in the oil and gas sector, and people say, oh yes, of course, safety or HSE is an additional cost that comes with wanting to do business in the oil and gas sector. Well, the reality is a safe company is a very efficient company. Looking after your business in a way that causes no harm to people or the environment, happily, I mean, you should do that morally anyway, but happily it is a very efficient way of running a business. Likewise with good governance. Oh, that's a cost of being a public company. Oh, you've got to have audit committees and boards and internal audit and all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally have to have. You could do that all yourself. Well, actually, the good news is it's a very efficient way of doing business.
Okay. If I can ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
What are the challenges that you faced in implementing ESG principles or practices in a country like Oman?
Well, initially, when we first listed as a public company, you have to recognize that in the Middle East there is a very strong culture of family business. And there are some fabulous family businesses out there, still operating as family businesses today, with hereditary executives coming through and board directors. So my comment is not to say that there is not a valid role for family businesses. They're some of the great businesses that have built the economies that we thrive in today. But interestingly, with our company, we were the first Omani company, family-owned business, to actually list on the public stock market, to take it through 4 or 5 of its best assets and, if you like, share them with the public shareholding. And of course, that brings an awful lot of scrutiny. Now, the one thing that when we're a private, closely held company, even when we're going through the bad times, we can manage that perception well, and we can put a brave face on it. Oh yes, it's affected us a bit, but everything's fine. Even though we're actually, there's a Churchill thing, when you're going through hell, keep going. So with good governance and disclosure and transparency, when you're going through hell, everybody knows about it. When you make an error, everybody knows about it. And that's a challenge, because the culture here, and it's a charming culture, the one of faith and respect and all these wonderful things that we love about the Arab world. And you then have to brave up to that in a public arena. And so that's a real challenge, and I think it takes brave local shareholders to take that first step. But once you've taken it, and you come through that, and yes, there's been some bad news, and we've disclosed it. We've made sure that our shareholders are fully informed, yes, of our progress, yes, of our plans, but also of our problems. It's not so bad once you get through, but there is that initial challenge of how are we going to deal with that? And then it comes quarter after quarter, and then it's your annual reporting, and then it's your analysts' meetings, and there are people daring to ask questions about the most intimate parts of your business. And so that is a challenge. But the good news is, again, once you embrace it, it makes you much more concerned about getting those problems resolved. And if you've got the same problem a year later, then that is a problem. But if it's not there, and you're dealing with a different set of problems, and you've moved on, I think that is certainly one of the major challenges with it there. Corporate social responsibility, it is interesting where you can get a feeling that some of the things that you go after, and we try and have a very balanced set of programs, one that will be helping people to help themselves, helping, we supported the Outward Bound program. This is helping young Omanis, this one happens to be in Oman, this program, to actually find themselves, develop skill sets for the future in a wonderfully structured program, a school that is basically out there in the wilderness of the desert or up a mountain and so on. We've done that. We've helped those who, people who need help. We've looked after children with special needs, but we try not to just give. We try and create something. In this case, we've tried to create getting teachers and classroom attendants trained who could actually help the children with special needs out in the interior, as well as they have a very well established place here in Muscat. And it's always trying to move that forward, helping people fulfill their potential. So these programs will generally be accepted. You get into things, we're doing a big program with environment that's announced just recently, where we're supporting the whale and dolphins program over the next 2 to 3 years. And this is something that not only will be good for preserving a national treasure in the waters off Oman, it will be developing scientific and educational knowledge. It will be helping the tourist industry in terms of making sure that there is responsible tourism and understanding of how you manage that around the populations of the whales and dolphins and so on. Now, sometimes these things can be, what are you doing that for? I thought you were in the oil and gas business. Why on earth are we getting involved in, we've sponsored an Omani adventurer to go to the poles, or to, whatever you try and do. Some of it seems, or a sporting event, or different things that you do that might be, what on earth has that got to do with our business? But again, so that's a challenge, and the challenge is to make sure that you communicate it clearly, that you align what you're doing in your social responsibility programs with your values, with the way you run your business, with actually putting something back in. So we make sure that we're not just reaping where we haven't sown. And those are the challenges, but I'd say that the challenges are minor in comparison to the rewards. I'm not talking about tangible rewards in terms of a bottom line. I'm talking about the rewards of being a company that makes a difference. Now, we don't want to be a corporate social responsibility hero in a liquidated company. Oh, they're marvelous, they give everything away and they do everything. No. Profit is something that drives us, and it's something that we value, but it actually comes from doing all the other things. You get your good governance right, you get your social responsibility and environmental responsibility right, you get your systems, your structures, your processes, above all your people. Get the right people, then all of the other things become possible. You get all that right, and profit will come as a consequence. And it comes back to good governance, good social responsibility, makes good business sense.
Okay, I like that conclusion. For a company that is about to start implementing corporate governance and CSR in the region, or Oman, what would be your advice for them?
My advice would be on two fronts. One is to definitely embrace it. Embrace it and understand it, and then don't beat yourself up because you can't implement everything in a day. Some of the things, and I've said, I've described some of the costs of governance, some of the costs of that, do seem like big costs, particularly if you're a small company and you think, well, I can't have internal audit and I can't, well then fine, you start by getting some more independent audit, not just of your annual external audit, but maybe of your systems and processes. Get some international accreditation of your systems and how you go about it. But take each step. Don't be afraid to start on that journey, because as you go down that journey, you will discover that happily all these things that look like high cost are actually very efficient, very good ways of running your business. So do learn everything you can about it and start. Do what's possible at the time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time and great insights.